Hi, Jake from Manners here. In this video, we're going to take a look at the mix session of our new live version of Happy Families. We're going to go over how we recorded it, the problems that we faced and how we fixed them, a few moments from the track, and the approach to getting it ready for release. We filmed and recorded this at our headline show at the Cluny in June 2024. We wanted to have a video which showcased our live performance and stage show, and we wanted a good live audio recording to go with that. The mix was done by myself, and then the video was edited by Liam Grimes.
You feel in your voice, we sift through the noise, find meanings in the feelings that you try to avoid. I think it's time to break the rules you set for me. This ain't...
Hopefully you'll agree that they did a great job, and for that I think they earned your follow. I'll put their socials down in the description. So like a lot of bands these days, we have a rack side of stage which takes in all of our lines and microphones from stage and mixes these for our in-ears. We took a USB feed from the mixer to the MacBook for Pro Tools to record. Now this machine was already handling firing all of our live backing tracks. It handles pedal changes for me via MIDI, and also fires off lighting cues to another program. So we're already asking it to do a lot, and asking this machine to then record all the audio that we're feeding in proved to be too much for it, and Pro Tools subsequently crashed. Now thankfully that first issue was resolved quite easily, because Ross at the Cluny, who was on front of house duties that night, also decided that he was going to record from his front of house desk as a backup, which we absolutely needed in that scenario. Now issue 2 presented in the fact that the multitracks from the Cluny actually had 2 file corruptions. So channels 1 and 3, the files corrupted, so we didn't have what was kick in and snare top. Thankfully these are 2 items that we had 2 mics on. We still had a kick out mic and a snare bottom mic, so I was able to trigger these 2 mics to simulate a kick in and snare top. So we go over to the multi-tracks here. So as you can see here in the green, we have all the drums. So just so you can hear what that sounds like, I will just solo the drums. Really happy with that overall drum sound. You can hear a little bit of bleed from the front of house coming in through probably the overheads and cymbals, spot mics, which just sort of gives you that overall live feel, which I think in this case is an absolute positive. So here you can see I've only got 1 channel for kick, being this one here, and then I've got 1 channel for snare, which is here. If I was just to say, for instance, take the trigger off so you can hear what we were working with beforehand. So this is just snare bottom. So as you can hear, that would have been totally unusable on its own. So being able to trigger that was a project saver. The same thing on the kick. So this is the kick out mic, which in fairness should be a lot better. So not a bad kick drum capture there, or overall picture. Other than that, the drums were fairly straightforward to mix, just the usual drum processing, nothing out of the ordinary. I'm not going to go too deep into settings and things like that, but I'm sure you can all hear that, you know, we've got them into a place where they sound very good. Again, that's just the drum bus soloed, and you can hear like bleed from my vocal quite loud, which is just the PA in the room feeding back into the mic, so, you know, emphasizing that live point. So the next thing in the session would be bass and then guitar. So one thing that helped massively on this mix is Drew and I both put a lot of time and effort into getting our live tones as good as they possibly can be and as close to the finished product. This doesn't only help have just an overall pleasing tone live, you know, nothing overly piercing, but also equally gonna cut well in a mix. But also it means in this scenario where, you know, we're looking at treating the live tracks, very little is required to process them. So Drew's bass is literally got a little bit of soothe on, which is literally just dug in like the sort of very low end sub frequencies just to get out of the way of the kick drum. Guitar wise, we've got a bit of tape saturation, We've got some EQ and some compression there. We've got a couple of little frequencies that were a bit piercing, so they cut those. And then we've also got soothe, which is triggered by the vocals, just to make sure the vocals cut through nicely. And then some stereo width as well getting added. Now, it's worth mentioning that there were some edits that I made to my playing. Main reason was for this second verse, things were just not 100% as tight as I would have liked them. That was partially due to, I think, live adrenaline, but also the gate not being tight enough, closing down and silencing some of those mutes in that sort of stabby section. Just to demonstrate which section I mean there, it's this.
Automatic, gotta keep the systematic. Trying to see through the static, and now you're acting frantic. While you're filling your voice, you sift through the noise. Find meanings in the feelings that you're trying to avoid.
So yeah, just trying to tidy that section up, just with it being so percussive. Just needed a little helping hand there to get sound good. But we all agreed that, you know, some slight edits here and there were fine, but overdubs were a no-go. We didn't want to do any recutting anything in the studio or overlaying anything. You know, we were all pretty happy with the performance that we gave on the night, so we didn't want to do anything like that. But nevertheless, there are a couple of little edits in there. Now, the same approach that we took on the guitar and bass tones was also spent on the tracks. So again, the only thing I've got on the tracks here is a bit of soothe, ducking the 808 out of the way of the kick drum, some volume automation of the main left and right of the tracks here, an EQ that's doing nothing, the same thing there, again ducking the tracks out of the way of the vocals, stereo width, and a limiter just to try and even things out, which means if we just looked at basically the instruments, so just everything other than the vocals, gives us this. So all of the work that we did on the front end, you know, making sure that the guitar, bass, drum tones were as good as possible, and then the accumulation of that with the tracks, all of that means that the instrumental sections of the song sound pretty big and they all play nicely with each other. So now moving on to vocals, I would say the vocals were probably the most challenging part of this mix. One thing I spent a lot of time doing before I really started processing them at all was I went and stripped out any parts of the track which weren't somebody singing or screaming or actually using the mic, and it was just trying to remove as much bleed as possible. Because we don't use stage amps or cabs, it means that the vocal mics don't pick up any bass or guitar, or very little, but they still had a lot of bleed from the live drums, because the drum kits are obviously right behind Ellen. That obviously meant that any processing that I was going to apply to Ellen's vocal mic or my vocal mic, it was going to have a lot of drums in there, and cymbals in particular. So once I had cut out all of the absolutely necessary bits where Ellen or I was singing or screaming or whatever, then I separated them up into sections of songs, like parts of songs. So like say verse, pre-chorus, and then also split them up into singing versus screaming. So as you can see here, this is the pre-chorus, and these are the sung parts, these are the screamed parts. What this enabled me to do was very easily, without any automation, was treat the sung parts differently to the screamed parts, which meant I wasn't reliant on, say, compressors to deal with this, like the huge dynamic changes. So that would often require really aggressive compressor settings, which would also bring up all of the bleed and the noise from the room. Two very common moves on vocal processing is quite heavy compression and quite heavy-handed top-end boosting. Now, both of these things don't work well when you've got a live drum kit in the room, because the compression brings everything up anyway, and then when you're boosting the top end, you're going to boost the cymbals. So what you end up getting is really harsh blasts of cymbal through your vocal mic. So cutting away all the unnecessary parts and then treating them differently enabled me to get a good sounding vocal without too much harsh bleed, and I'm pretty stoked with the results, to be fair. So the vocals sound like this.
Mangled in my words, you fucking twisted. Automatic, gotta keep the systematic.
So you can hear there like how fast Ellen switches between a singing and a screaming. She's really good at that, and it means that being able to treat them differently like we have done here, it just means that it keeps everything under control, and at a similar volume or a similar impact. One very nice touch from the Clooney's multitracks is that Ross had set up an ambient mic. It captures a really good picture of the crowd reaction and the energy in the room, which we use heavily both in the intro and the outro of the song. And then obviously that was mixed in with the rest of the tracks to give this. And what I hope that we achieved there is bring it straight into what feels like you're in the room. And then we used it again in the outro. Really emphasizing the fact that this is a live recording and trying to bring a bit of energy to it and a bit of rawness. Now finally, with this being a live recording, there is often quirks whenever you're doing something like that. A couple of little funny moments for you. The first ever show we did, there was a great clip on the intro of Happy Families at the same point as this. Right in the gap, Ellen screamed, "Gan mental," at the crowd. We used that on socials. We all thought it was pretty cool. I think Ellen forgot exactly what she'd said in the moment because what came out was this. Fucking mental! Fucking mental. Which she hates, and we all love that she hates it. But also, this is not just an Ellen, because later on, just before one of the riffier sections comes in, later on, just before one of the like the slower riff section comes in, I shout at the crowd to move. However, what actually comes across is this. Moo. You just heard me shout there, moo. Very good. And then finally, we also sung the wrong lyrics for the first line of the middle eight. So if anybody can tell me what this line should be, you're going to win some form of merch, whether it be a CD or something like that. Or maybe even a t-shirt if we're feeling ultra generous, but we'll see. If anyone can comment down below what the lyrics should be for this section. I know exactly what it takes. What should that line be? Comment down below and you might win a t-shirt or something like that. But I think that's about it. That's all the embarrassing moments in the track for you as well. So I hope you enjoyed watching. If you want to see more content like this, let us know. Make sure to go and check out the full video on YouTube. Make sure to stream it on all your usual streaming sites, and see you in a bit.